So I'll jump back and forth, but Tamal taught me most things in spiritual life from the first time I met him in about 72 in New Zealand. There was one particular activity that happened about 74 in New Zealand. Tamal asked me to shave him up. We were in the Gribblehurst Road Temple. It's a temple where Srila Prabhupada visited and installed the deities there. So in Gribblehurst Road, it's 2 stories. So you go up onto a platform and you walk up the stairs. So the Pujari had just finished cooking the 12 o'clock offering. So he had a hot pot of dal in his hand. And when he was coming down the stairs, his hands got burnt. So he went to put the dal on the ledge, and the dal slipped off the ledge, went right down the wall, and covered Tamal Krishna Maharaj in hot dal. So Tamal has pretty incredible personality. It's like a chili sometimes and a rose the other. So I was expecting the chili side to manifest, but he just stood there for a few minutes, and then he turned around and he says, "Well, Kala, am I burnt?" And I says, "I can't tell, so let's go upstairs and look in the mirror." And he says, "Well, you won't be shaving me up now because there was some burning there." So we went upstairs and we just waited for a while, but I still shaved him up. So he was incredible in different situations. Now, jumping ahead to 5 days before Tamal left his body, we started the Kirtan Mela. So the first Kirtans were in his room. He'd been out of Mayapur for many years, maybe about 7 years. So 2 things he wanted to establish when he came back was daily bathing in the Ganga. Daily we would go down just before Prashad, a group of us, and bathe in the Ganga. And he says, for many years I come to Mayapur but don't bathe in the Ganga, and the Ganga is right here. So as we know, the Ganga is coming from the lotus feet of Vishnu, carried down by celestial airplanes, lands on the head of Lord Shiva. So who wouldn't want to bathe in the Ganga? So he wanted to establish, he says, yes, during the meetings we should all come down and bathe in the Ganga and then go back and take Krishna Prasad. So about 4:30 at 5 o'clock we would meet in his room. So then he decided, because he'd have the mats in the middle, that we'd have a half an hour of chanting. So the first night I think there was 4 or 5 of us, and we just started rotating the chanting. He would start, we'd all start like that. Then, of course, the word got out that there was Kirtan in Tamal's room. So the next night, maybe there was 50 devotees. The next night, 150. Next night, a couple of thousand. Now, it was only a small room. But in India, as you know, there's always room. If you're on a train, and that's a gap, that's enough for a family. So you might have the comfortable seat, but at the end of the ride you're on the floor. That's just living in India. So we would all crowd into Tamal's room and everyone would be chanting, and the room would be packed, and then the hallway would be packed, and then someone would just see a space, and I'd look at them with my critical mentality, and I was going, no way is that devotee going to fit in there. And not only one devotee, 3 or 4 would get in there. So this is the mystical atmosphere and potency of the Dham and the holy name. It creates excitement, and it creates arrangements. Like they say, the Dham is like a lotus, opening and closing. So when we're in the association of the Vaishnavas, many mystical things happen. So it got to the point where we couldn't have the Kirtan anymore in the room, and then it moved down to the Panchatattva hall. So as far as I know, that was the beginning of the Kirtan Mela. So I can stop there. So I was travelling with Tamal in the car the day of his disappearance. So it was a funny situation because Tamal was going to leave couple of days before he left his body. But somehow there was some traffic problems or some protesting or something going on in the city, so he decided to change it. And me and my wife were also going to leave a little early, but it was my wife's birthday, and she was sort of like, she was a disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj and sort of shiksha of, into doing a shiksha of Tamal, because she liked the intellectual aspect of Tamal. She was intellectual, and so they formed a relationship like that. So she thought, well, it's my birthday, my 40th birthday. I'd like to travel into Delhi. Oh, not Delhi. What's that? Calcutta with Tamal. So then we were traveling in the car, and I think it was 3/4 of an hour after Krishna. It was 3/4 of an hour after we were traveling that the car hit the tree. People go to that tree, and that's a friend for some people and an enemy for others. So one can form different types of relationships with that tree. So Tamal was in the front, my wife was behind Tamal, and I was sitting behind my wife. So nothing with Tamal. There's no simplicity with Tamal. It took half an hour just to put the safety belt on. It's not like most people just hop in the car and put the safety belt on, but not Tamal. First of all, you've got to check the safety belt. He's got to be sitting properly in the car. The safety belt has to be properly, everything has to be harnessed in. So I remember the first part, we were chanting and just talking about what's coming up in Karatuk. We were going to get together at the palace for a couple of months and chant, me, my wife, himself, and a few others. He says, you two are very attracted to chanting, so I want to take you deeper. So I don't know what deeper is. It's pretty nice at all levels. So after we got the safety belt on and we were chanting, I think we just went through Shantipur, and we were just talking, chanting, and then all of a sudden there was just a blank. And that blank is when the car hit the tree, and the next minute the car was rolling in the air, it flipped in the air. So I remember becoming conscious again in the air. So I remember just flying in the car, and then the car hit the ground. The next day we measured, I think it was about 30 meters. So I think it was hit the tree here and landed in the far corner. So the car landed upside down. So it landed upside down, and then all the village people came out, and Tamal was still upside down because he had a safety belt on. So then the villagers tipped the car up the right way. So it was an incredible situation to be in, because also I think there was a car behind. Some of his disciples were in that car. So when the car was upside down, his disciples were hysterical and crying and so on and so forth. So at the same time, the villagers were basically, I'm not trying to criticize the villagers, were turning the car upside down. They're also taking the luggage. So I had to somehow or other get Tamal out of the car, get my wife out of the car, and try and get the luggage. So things were mystically happening very fast, and a lot of decisions have to be made. So then I put Tamal on the grass. We lay him on the grass, and at that particular point, of course, he was deceased. He had left his body. The only cut that Tamal had was just a little cut on his elbow, because I've got his jumper. I gave his jumper, actually, it's in Singatoka now. There's a little, that's all he had. Of course, when they did the autopsy, they had to cut the body in different places. Now, the most amazing thing is when an acharya or a guru or a saintly person dies in India, they want to do a full autopsy, because they think someone might have killed the guru. Maybe it's a common thing here. But Jayapataka Maharaj, you got a special letter from the governor or something. He was on the phone. They says, no, just do the basic autopsy on Tamal and my wife and leave it at that. And then the doctor, he came to me and said, actually, the guru is deceased, but your wife is in a worse situation because she only has 10% of surviving because she had her head on the top of the taxi. So at that particular point, I think Shivaram Maharaj turned up, Niranjana Maharaj turned up, and Bibi Govinda. So they were chanting and helping out. Now when we went to leave the hospital, the villagers wouldn't let us leave. And I thought, so there's all this happening, your wife's left the body, your friend's left his body, and all the villagers crowded around ambulance. They wanted to see the guru. They heard that a saintly person had left their body, and they were not going to let us leave until they had darshan of Tamal. And we were thinking, this is just not going to happen. They were all going to come on. So what we did is we had Tamal's feet or head at one end. So we just pulled back the covers and we told the villagers, you can have darshan from outside. They had darshan, they're very cordial, and then they let us come back to Mayapur. So that's the disappearance of Tamal Krishna Goswami. We heard here, I remember the same time as my wife was being cremated, I would run. Well, I wouldn't run because I couldn't walk. I'd crawl from there and come over and say goodbye to Tamal. So Tamal has incredible disciples. He's such an incredible personality. He has incredible disciples. In Fiji, there's 2 lady disciples. They're about my age now, 120, 130. So they live in a place called Singatoka. So there's Suva and Latoka, and in the middle is Singatoka. So Tamal used to pass through that particular little town. He told his disciples, build me a house and I'll stay longer. So Tamal, they were thinking of building a house, but Tamal had left his body. So they thought, we'll build a memorial. So they built a 4-story temple. And at the top in the temple room is a memorial room. So these ladies built this temple on their own with no help. It cost $6 million. So in 3 years from when Tamal left his body, 3 years later, they'd collected $6 million and they'd built this incredible temple. It's one of the most amazing temples. I think floor space, it's one of the biggest ISKCON temples outside of India. 2 ladies. So they sacrificed everything. They sold their business, they sold their houses, they sold their cars, they sold their jewelry. Now, the day before the temple was about to open, the temporary floor hadn't been laid. So they asked the builders, can you lay the floor and then we'll pay you after the opening because I'm sure someone's going to give some money to pay. And they says no. So they had an emergency fund, 80,000, how much was it? I don't know, but it was whatever they had, that was the amount that the floor was going to cost. So talk about Mother Yasoda. We see even in the association of Vaishnavas today, Krishna can take away everything. So they had to sell their jewelry and close their bank account just to open this temple. So this is the category of his disciples. I think all around the world there's Tamal disciples doing puja, helping out with temple management and so on and so forth. We have many Tamal Krishna Maharaj disciples in Auckland. We have one lady, she's about 85 years old, and she can hardly walk, but she does the Raj Bhoga 4 times a week. She gets dropped off at the temple at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning by her son. She brings all the vegetables, either she grows or she buys, and she goes upstairs, cuts the vegetables, cleans everything, cooks everything, puts it on the plate, takes it into the altar, offers it to the deities, brings it out, does the artik, put the deities to sleep, and then she'll come back into the kitchen. Now, if there's any devotees that come to the door and say they're hungry, she'll cook. So she just doesn't stop at 12:30. She'll be in there to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, until everyone's satisfied. Till everyone's had some sabji, some chapatis, or whatever she's cooking. So even when she was in hospital, because she's at that age, she was in hospital. So we went to see her in hospital, and the first thing she said was, "Who's cooking the Raj Bhoga?" So, and we have one other lady there, she's maybe 60 plus. And from the day that Tamal asked her to come to Auckland, New Zealand, from that day, she's been steadily serving the deity. And these people, these devotees, they don't complain. I've never heard them complain. So this is the caliber. And Fiji, if you ever happen to get the opportunity to go Fiji, now there's 4 temples. And these are not small temples. These temples are big temples. It's all debt-free. And they have beautiful deity worship, and so many devotees there in Fiji. So this is the caliber, of Tamal. So we can go on, and if you don't stop me, we would go on, but we are stopping because that's the nature of the day. Tamal Krishna Goswami Ki Jai.